Do you think that I am wearing my French hood incorrectly? If not, let me tell you what's wrong with this picture. But before we get started, make sure to select like if you like this video. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments below. And as always, subscribe. Hello and welcome to today's discussion on French hoods. Should they be raised or should they be flat on the head? Turns out I've been wearing my French hood incorrectly for years and did not know. And I found myself recently going down a rabbit hole and finding out more information, and I wanted to share with you what information I found out so far. So again, welcome to French hoods. Should they be raised or should they be flat? As you can see on this front page, there are two pictures of me, and one is wearing a French hood on the right hand side. That was my first one that I ever bought, and then the one on the left was actually a Christmas gift from my husband. So what comes to mind when you think of a French hood? Do you think of movies such as The Other Boleyn Girl from 2008, which is the picture on the left-hand side? Or do you think of the picture on the right, which is from Anne of the Thousand Days from 1969? If you notice, there are French hoods here, but they are, just so you know for later on. A French hood is a crescent-shaped headdress that fits on the head sort of like a modern headband. And it has a veil attached to the back side of it. So do you think of the movies when you think of a French hood, or do you think of portraits such as these? On the left is a portrait of Elizabeth I when she was princess in 1546, and on the right is an unknown woman. It was formerly known as Margaret Tudor, and this painting is from about 1520. If you notice, both of these have a crescent-shaped headdress, but they're flat on the head rather than how they are in the movies where they're upright. So, what is a French hood? According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, a French hood is a 16th century woman's headdress covering the hair except in front and having a jeweled crescent-shaped framework, sometimes with a fall of cloth, and set back on the head. According to Lexico, which is powered by the Oxford Dictionary, a French hood is a woman's headdress in a style regarded as French, specifically one of the 16th and 17th centuries, consisting of a bow-shaped front piece contoured to the head, almost covering the ears, from which a cloth tippet fell, covering the neck and upper back. My definition of a French hood is that it's a crescent-shaped style of rigid headdress worn in some European countries, such as England, France, and Belgium, around and during the 16th century. You can find the beginnings of the French hood in the late 15th century, and you can see it starting to wane as the 17th century begins. It's typically adorned with jewels, but not always. This headdress showed off the top front portion of the lady's hair, which was always parted down the middle. As you can see, my part is on the side here and not directly in the middle. They would have parted their hair directly in the middle, braided their hair, and then circled their braids around the crown of their head, and then used hair taping techniques to attach their braids to the crown of their head. And then the hood would have sat on top of their head, being braced against that braid. This hood ended at or just below the jawline. So when it goes around, however it curves around, it normally ends right about here, like where the jawline or the bottom earlobe are. This type of hood was probably made popular in England by Princess Mary Tudor upon her return from France after her short marriage to Louis XII of France in 1515. She married him in 1514 and he died in 1515, and then Mary, who was the younger sister of Henry VIII, returned back to England and brought this fashion with her. But this fashion may have already been in England, but maybe not as popular as it was after Mary returned. This style of headdress was already worn in other places in Europe. Here are a few examples of French hoods in paintings. On the left-hand side is a painting of Margaret of Austria from about 1490, and it's at the Met Museum. And again, you can see a little bit of her hair right in the front, and then it's a headdress that's flat against her head, slightly puffed up a bit, but if you think about having a braid right around the crown of your head and then having the hood sit up and over that braid, that's what gives it that tiny bit of lift, but not the upright that we see in movies. On the right-hand side is a picture of Anne, I mispronounced this, I'm sorry, please correct me, Anne de Bretagne. This painting is from about 1492 to 1495, and it's at the Morgan Library and Museum. And again, with this, you can see the hood, you can see a little bit of her hairline right in the front, and then the hood sitting on the main part of her head, and then the veil hanging in the back. The thing to note with these two paintings, the one on the right, you'll see there is a long side of black, a long piece of black going on the side, and then a separate rectangular piece of black on the back side. That's the veil. On the left-hand side, if you look, she has the side pieces which are black, but instead of having a black veil in the back, hers looks like it's a semicircular veil, and it's of a, I guess I'd call that a tan color. But to me, this helps knowing where the veil is compared to where the sides are. So again, thinking of the movies compared to portraits and effigies, sculptures, were French hoods flat? Well, yes, when looking at historical portraits in profile or in sculptures and funeral effigies, all of the French hoods were relatively flat. Also, the French hood appears to be multi-layered, pinned together rather than one complete hood. This makes sense because it's both practical and it follows how women dressed at that time. By having separate layers attached to each other, then the layers could be rotated out with the change of the outfit, such as the four parts in the sleeves. If you know anything, or if you don't know anything about women, specifically Tudor women, at this time period in the 16th century, you would have an overskirt, but then there was an underskirt, and that underskirt would show through. So the overskirt would be split, and then there would be a triangle piece, and then that's where you would see the four-part skirt. Just the same, you could have long flowing sleeves, and then you would have a little sleeve right here, right on the forepart of your arm, and the forepart of your skirt and your sleeve could match each other, but then say you wanted to change up your outfit a bit. I know I've done this before in the SCA. For people who don't know that, the SCA is the Society for Creative Anachronism. And specifically, I have one particular outfit that I like to do this with. It is a black velveteen outfit. So I've got black velveteen bodice with long black velveteen sleeves and a black velveteen overskirt. For my sleeves and my four-part skirt, it's interchangeable. I have a set of, it's like a green upholstery fabric with little pearl stone all over it for the sleeves and the skirt. Or I also have a red version of my green version. And so I can change out and decide one day if I want to wear my black velveteen with green sleeves and a green four-part skirt, or I can change it out and wear my black velveteen with my red skirt and my red sleeves. If the French hood was all one complete piece, I would have to have two separate French hoods to go with the different outfits. If they're multi-layered, then I could trade out the green for the red. So I think this makes sense that the French hoods came in layers rather than all one piece, but we'll get more into this as we go on. Here on this page, you will see on the left-hand side is a picture of the tomb of Catherine Parr. She was the 6th wife of Henry VIII, and she died in 1548. And on the right-hand side is a picture of the effigy of Elizabeth Danvers Cave, and she died in 1558. Both of these give us an idea of what French hoods looked like at that time in the 1540s and the 1550s. If you look, there is one piece, then there is a separate piece behind it and kind of over top of it, and then there's also the veil in the back. So if French hoods were flat, then why do we in modern times create French hoods that are raised? Remember at the very beginning of this video when I asked you if I was wearing my French hood incorrectly? I was wearing it where it was more upright rather than flat against my skull. Well, maybe we see a movie and we want to recreate what was in that movie. Remember a few slides ago, the pictures from The Other Boleyn Girl or Anne of the Thousand Days? Well, it's in movies. Maybe that's why we want to recreate what we saw in the movie. Some historical portraits, specifically when the portrait sitter is facing the painter, it creates the facade of the raised hood. It's an embellishment made by the painter when the lady was facing directly at the painter, which makes sense because if the lady is facing directly at the painter getting her portrait painted, then you may only see maybe a little bit of the hood on the side, but nothing on top because she's looking directly at the painter. So by embellishing it a bit and showing a little more of that hood, it makes it a little more complete rather than just having this mysterious little slither of black velvet on one cheek and then not knowing what was around the rest of the head. Also, the lady's braided hair around the crown of the head with the multiple layers of the hoods, it would help to create this optical illusion of a crescent shape because the hood is propped up against that braid on the crown of their head. So maybe it's that optical illusion that we're trying to recreate and make our French hoods more upright. Or maybe it's the, and if I mispronounced this, I'm sorry, please correct me, the kokoshnik has inspired reenactors to create the raised crescent-shaped hood. Wait, you don't know what a kokoshnik is? The kokoshnik is a traditional Russian headdress which has been worn since the 16th century, but a similar round headdress covered the hair that existed as early as the 10th century. Modern royalty, for example, you think of Queen Elizabeth II, her tiara, well, the tiaras that she wears, they've been inspired by the kokoshnik, as for example, on the right-hand side is Queen Alexandra's kokoshnik tiara from 1888. It's with the Royal Trust Collection, or actually that should be the Royal Collection Trust, sorry. And so these tiaras are inspired by the kokoshnik. Here's an interesting tidbit. Did you know that Peter the Great forbade the upper-class women from wearing kokoshniks? However, Catherine the Great revived this fashion accessory and then it became popular again in Russia. Here are a couple of examples of what a kokoshnik is. On the left-hand side is a portrait of a peasant woman from about 1784. It was painted by Ivan Argonov. And as you can see, this particular headdress does not show any of the hair up on top. And it goes back a little bit on the head and then just goes directly upright and around. The same for the portrait on the right. It's the portrait of the Empress Alexandra. I don't know how to pronounce that last name, I'm sorry. It was painted by Franz Kruger about the 19th century. With this one, you can see the front part of her hair. You can see her hair has been parted in the middle. The kokoshnik sits back on the head a bit. But again, it is a big headdress that is very upright and flamboyantly displayed. But back to French hoods. Remember how I said they are multi-layered, or could be? Some reenactors create the French hood to be one solid hood. In fact, I own a few hoods that are simply one piece with everything permanently attached to it. However, upon closer inspection of portraits and sculptures, it makes sense that these hoods were possibly multi-layered. These layers typically had an undercap, which could have been a coif, a second cap, and then the hood, which may or may not have decoration attached, which if you look at historical written documents, you can find this decoration to be referred to as paste. It's what we would know as a billament, and even with that, when you look at historical documents, they can spell this word 3 different ways, which is why you see it spelled out 3 ways on the bottom for billament. To give you an idea of the multi-layers, on the left-hand side is a painting. It's called Portrait of a Female Donor. It's painted by Jan Provost from about 1505, and it's at the Museo Nacional Thyssen-Bornemisza. And as you can see, there is a white layer. That would be the white cap or the coif. And then over that is a red cap with gold trim. And then there's a black hood on the back, and there's no billament, no decoration between the red and the black. One thing to note with this, there are no physical examples in the world remaining of French hoods, so we only have paintings and effigies to go by. We have written descriptions to kind of gather between that and what we see with the stone effigies or with the paintings to try to figure out what and how these were made. So a few more examples of the multi-layered look. On the left-hand side is the statue from the tomb of Diane de Poitiers. This is from 1566, and if you look closely, you can see just the very hint of a detail of the coif, which was just barely visible, and then the cap pinned to the hood. And if you look closely at this picture, you can actually see there are 2 pins, one here and then one back behind the ear, and she had a plain hood with a veil, so no decoration, no billament, and she has a rectangular veil on the backhand side. On the right side of the page, you will see the funerary monument of Antoinette de Fonte. Mispronounced that, please correct me. This is from 1571, and this one I find interesting because you can see the multiple layers. It even helps give you the idea of the layers sitting on top of each other to give that optical illusion of that slight crescent shape that was slightly upraised. But if you look, she has a white cap. It's got a gold fringe or a gold frill sewn to the white cap. And then behind that is the black hood with the filament. It looks like it's a gold braided cord all around as the billament. And also with this, the black hood that's sitting on top looks like it has an extra strap that goes further on the front part of her, like almost near her forehead, not quite to her forehead, but I think that strap just helped secure the hood to her head. Also, if you look closely, I don't know for sure, but it looks almost like the white cap might have a chin strap. If you look, it looks like there's a tiny little sliver of a white strap there. You'll find some had chin straps, some did not. So if you look on the far right in the bottom corner of this screen, you will see she has a black veil that goes down the back, and it's rectangular in shape. So first, let's discuss the white undercap. It may have been a coif. Again, we have no physical examples of what the undercap may have exactly been. We know what coifs looked like because in museums we have embroidered coifs, but it could have been a coif. It may have been some other type of white cap. as you see on the drawing here of Mary Tudor from about 1514. So how do you make it? Do you make it like a coif? Do you make it like a modified Viking hood and just cut it back more so you can see more of the hairline? Just so you know, a Viking cap would be just a straight line down and a straight line back, so very geometric around the face. Or use your imagination, I guess, with making the white undercap. Since we don't know exactly how it was made, we also can just simply guess at what made that white layer. And I'm guessing it was probably something easily washable, like linen. To me, that makes sense if I've got linen here, because if you think of a Tudor dress, you have a linen smock, and then on top of that linen is where you put the velvets or the silks, because the linen is the layer that is going to soak up all of the bodily oils, all of the sweats, to help prevent any staining on the velvet and to make the outfit last longer. So to me, it makes sense to use the same logic for the head and having a removable layer like a coif right on the head. That way any oils from the hair, any sweat can be soaked up into that linen, and then you can unpin your cap or your hood from your cap, take the cap off, wash the cap, sew a new cap, put that on, and then pin your hood back to your head. Oh, and before how I said a Viking coif is very geometric, the picture on the left-hand side is an idea of the Jorvik hood, which, like I said, very geometric. Here are some examples of coifs, or what we believe to have been the white undercaps that would have been worn under the French hood. On the left-hand side is a blackwork embroidered English coif from the late 16th century, and that is at the Met Museum. In the middle picture, that is a drawing of Queen Anne Boleyn. It was drawn by Hans Holbein the Younger sometime between 1533 and 1536, and it's with the Royal Collection Trust. And on the right-hand side is a portrait of a young woman with a white coif, and that was painted by Hans Holbein the Younger from about 1541 in Germany. And that painting is with the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. The next layer we'll call the overcap. It could be considered a bonnet. This cap is confused with the raised crescent shape that you see today. This cap, it was usually made of a rich fabric, could be velvet, could be silk. Typically the cap was black, but sometimes could be red or white. This cap sometimes was adorned with beads or embroidery, especially near the edge. Chin straps were optional. It probably depended on where the hood sat on the head. If you remember a few slides ago where I said on that one stone effigy where there was a little sliver of white right there that went with the white undercap, well, just the same, you may have had a chin strap for the overcap. Part of where it depends on where the cap sat on the head is how much hair was showing up on top, because the more you push it back, the more you need to have something underneath your chin to balance out the weight. And then the next layer would be the hood with the veil. This is that the sides that went down that were black, and then the veil is on the back. It changed shape during the 16th century, and it could vary between countries. Always, it was a round shape around the head, that crescent shape that we're going for, rather than the gable hood, which is sort of, think of a house sitting on your head. That the house sitting on your head is a gable hood. So the French hood is more round and hugs the curvature of your head. And the veil attached on the back could be semicircular or it could be rectangular. Rectangular seems to have been more popular. At least that's mostly what I've seen with the stone effigies, is the rectangular rather than the semicircular. It could include a glue stiffened fabric base, or perhaps the metal billament that was sewn on the edges is what helps give it its shape. This was usually made of a rich fabric, such as velvet, silk, or taffeta. The edge was sometimes decorated with gold embroidery. Later in the 16th century, the hood became shorter and left the neck exposed. And some ladies wore chin straps, while others may have had the veil edges tied underneath their hair right at the nape of their neck. If you remember at the very beginning of this video, I had my French hood sitting on top of my head, and then the ties were underneath my hair in the back. Again, that goes with depending on how far back the hood sits on your head, as far as if you need a chin strap or not to help counterbalance the weight of the hood. On the right-hand side is one pattern I found online for an idea of one way how to make a French hood. And this particular pattern is if you want the rectangular shape in the back. Here are two other patterns. This is from Drea Leeds' website, and on the left-hand side is a pattern for the French hood from about 1535 to 1540, and on the right-hand side is a pattern from about 1545. To give you an idea, the pattern on the left is more Anne Boleyn's style of hood, and then on the right-hand side is Princess Elizabeth's pattern. The difference being Anne Boleyn's sits a little bit more forward on her head, whereas Princess Elizabeth's sits, it looks like, and it might be an optical illusion, looks like it sits a little bit further back. Part of it is just looking at how much of the part is showing, and when you look at that, it actually looks to be about the same. The difference is Anne Boleyn's goes straight down along the side of the face, whereas Elizabeth's kind of goes back and curves around like a C shape towards the bottom of the jawline. One of the things that you will find with certain patterns on the left-hand side are examples from the Tudor tailor. And with those patterns, it actually shows where the hood actually goes around and connects at the nape of the neck. And that may have been possible. If you look on the right-hand side, there is a portrait medal of Mary Tudor, and because it's in profile, you can actually see, the one cap with the chin strap. You can see the hood sitting back further on her head with the billament. You can see the veil that is sewn only up at the top, and then the rectangular veil hanging down. But because of where the veil is sitting, you can see where the hood comes down and goes and wraps itself around the back of her head. So any of these patterns could be historically accurate. They may not be historically accurate. To me, it all just depends on what painting or what effigy, or in this case, what portrait medal you are looking at and how you want to interpret that hood. So we've gone over the coif and the cap and the hood, and now the billament, which again, if you read historical documents, you might hear this or read it as being referred to as paste. In the early part of the 16th century, the billament, if the woman wore one, she could have worn her hood plain, appears to have been attached to the hood. In the later part of the 16th century, it appears to have become a separate piece. The billament, or paste, was a stiffened decorative border that could be decorated with jewels or with a gold braid. An example of this is on the left-hand side. It's the painting of Isabella of Austria, painted by Peter van, if I mispronounced this, I'm sorry, please correct me, Kokoshnik, from about 1510 to 1515, and this is part of the Royal Collection Trust. And for me, the easiest way to try to describe the billament is, imagine you've got your coif, you may or may not have your cap, your hood, and then for that extra decorative piece, imagine having a metal embellished headband that you put on top to show off your finery. Have you ever heard of, and if I mispronounce this, I'm sorry, a BONGRACE. Before going down this rabbit hole, I had never actually heard of this. I had seen portraits with this and did not know what I was looking at. On the right-hand side, you will see the portrait of Jane Seymour. She was the third wife of Henry VIII. This painting was painted by Hans Holbein from around 1536 or 1537, and the painting is at the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna. And if you look, she has, with her veil, it actually looks like her veil is split. So she's got part of the rectangular veil hanging down, but the other side she has, because she has a gable hood. First of all, this is not a French hood, it's a gable hood. So imagine that house shape sitting on her head. But if you look, the veil goes up and over and is sitting a bit on top of her head like this. In the early 16th century, the veil ended on the mid-back of the lady, so it went down to about the middle of the back. The long back was known as a bavolet in French. Bavolet? Bavolet. Please correct me. In some portraits, the veil in the back was flipped over the head and pinned to the top of the hood to create the BONGRACE. And that is the part that we see here in the picture with Jane Seymour, where part of her veil has been flipped up and is pinned to the top of her hood. The BONGRACE is a bonnet with a brim that creates a shade to protect the face from the sun. This in itself tells me that the veil or the fall, however you want to describe the piece of fabric that goes down to the middle of the back, to me is something that is of a stiffer fabric, such as velvet. It would not have been the see-through veils that we see on a lot of modern historic replicas of French hoods, because you want something that is going to be stiff, so when you flip it up to help create that brim, think of a Tudor version of a baseball cap for a woman. You want to protect your pale skin, so you want to create something to block the sun from, being on your face. So you flip your veil up, pin it in place, and now you've got that nice shade on your face. You want something firm, like maybe in this case, it looks like it's almost double layered velvet, because it looks like it's velvet on both sides. So that would be rather thick and could be something to help provide shade versus the see-through flimsy veils that we might see now on recreated historic replicas of French hoods. And that see-through veil is just going to fall flat on your face, and it's not going to create any kind of shade. If anything, it might be more of a nuisance on your forehead. While going down this rabbit hole, it got me to thinking. I have some Mennonite friends, and I have actually worn prayer caps and the plain dress while visiting them. And, well, I think modern inspiration could come from the Mennonites. The Mennonites originally got their start about this time during the Tudor era in the 16th century. This is when the Anabaptists became Anabaptists. And if you know anything, or more importantly, if you don't know anything about Mennonites, the same with Amish, they are usually very reluctant to change their ways. And anything they do change, they usually have to have the ordnung, which is the group elders of their particular fellowship, come to a discussion and an agreement on changing something. And this could be something as simple as, can women wear wristwatches? And then if so, are they allowed to have any color of band, or must it specifically be black leather band only? Believe it or not, that was actually one that came up with the local fellowship. But because they are so reluctant to change how they are, specifically the Old Order Amish and Old Order Mennonite, because they're reluctant to change their ways, they still ride in horse and buggies. But also because of that, we can look back at them for inspiration on how maybe the caps could have been worn. On the left-hand side, you see the prayer cap. she's wearing a prayer cap on her head, but they wear straight pins on the caps. There's a straight pin with the cap that I wore. I wore a straight pin on the left side and one on the right side. And this helped secure the cap to your head. So if, say, for example, you are wearing a coif that does not have a chin strap, you could take straight pins and pin it to your hair because your hair is already pulled back. For Mennonites, they tend to wear their hair in a bun and then put the prayer cap on top of the bun. For Tudor era, you would have had your hair in braids, wrap the braids around the crown of your head, used hair taping technique, and attached, well, pretty much sewn your braids to your head. And so there's only so much wiggle room when you take the straight pin, you dig it down under your hair and then back through. There's only so much wiggle room between where the hair begins, at where your forehead ends and the hairline begins, and the braid. So that the coif would only sit or maybe wiggle slightly. So thinking of the Amish or the Mennonite prayer cap and how it's pinned to your head, and then with that, then you could take the next cap, pin it to that, and then pin the hood onto that and create the layered look. Another way of thinking of this on the right-hand side is a Quaker bonnet. The Amish and Mennonites have their own version of this bonnet. It is a bonnet that they normally wear for travel or for more formal occasions. The prayer cap is what they would wear when they're just around home. But the bonnet goes on top of the prayer cap. So you've got the prayer cap pinned to your hair, then you put the bonnet on top. And so if you look directly at the woman, you might see a hint of the prayer cap, but most of it will be hidden by the bonnet. So you might see only a slight sliver of it, just like back to the French hood pattern or the French hood pictures. You will see maybe a little sliver of the coif, and then the rest of it is the overcap and the hood that you see. And then with the bonnet, just like with the French hood, then you could then decide if you wanted chin straps, if you wanted to tie it underneath at the base of your neck, well, the base of your hairline. And if you want to make your own French hood, then here are a few websites to give you more information on step-by-step tutorials and pictures on that step-by-step process. You have the Tudor Tailor pattern if you want to make your hood all one piece. Again, this is all conjecture as far as if the French hood was all one piece. If it was separate layers that could be interchangeable. In the end, design your French hood how you want to wear it. The main thing is, wear your French hood flat on your head and not completely upright like the kokoshnik. And if you want more information on any of the pictures that were featured, here is my Works Cited page, and my Works Cited page continued. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Post them in the comments below. If you like this video, select thumbs up that you liked it. And as always, please subscribe.